My name is Anika Kumar. If I told you I was born in the year 2000, what preconceptions would you already have about me? That I can't go more than a few minutes without my iPhone? That I spend more time texting my friends than actually talking to them? That my attention span is only 6 seconds long, 8 on a good day? Now, meet my grandparents. If I told you they were born in the years 1939 and 1944, what preconceptions would you already have about them? That they don't know how to operate a computer? That they still carry around those clunky flip phones? That they love to play bingo? In case you were wondering, none of these stereotypes are actually true. My grandma and grandpa are some of the smartest and sharpest people I know, and they both use their iPhones to maintain very active social lives that are, not gonna lie, probably 10 times more interesting than my own. But the point is, these are the stereotypes we have been trained to hold. All of these things contribute to ageism, which is discrimination upon the basis of age. Ageism affects people of all ages, but its particular harm in the older adult generation has become so culturally ingrained that most of us don't even realize its implications, or that we're all playing into it. We've all heard the common adage, age is just a number. I love that saying. It reminds me of the older woman I met at the gym who could probably overtake me in just about any test of physical strength or stamina. Or the older man at my local assisted living facility who loves to sing and would 100% put me to shame at karaoke. But the problem is, in contemporary society, age is not just a number. In our culture, every birthday we have, we get 1 year closer to the endless barrage of senior citizen jokes, or offensive stereotypes, or people underestimating us. I'm sure we've all heard of the wage gap, but today I want to introduce you to something maybe you haven't heard of before: the age gap. The age gap is a term I have come to use to represent the solidification of a young and old binary and the gradual distancing of the former from the latter. The age gap alienates people of all ages, but it's especially detrimental to those we consider to be old. That is to say, it may not be affecting some of us right now, but it definitely will be. We see the age gap in the workplace, where despite legislation preventing this, older adults are discriminated against in hiring and firing processes. In a survey on the AARP website, 50.7% of respondents claimed that their greatest impediment to getting a career started was being seen as too old in the workplace. There are many perceived impediments to getting a career started, but age should not be one of them. We see this in the media, where every magazine is filled with a handful of advertisements for anti-aging creams and serums designed to keep you looking youthful. So many people are on the hunt for the fountain of youth that we see a multi-billion-dollar global industry basically founded on ageism. These corporations are capitalizing on the age gap by preying on our fears and anxieties about looking, feeling, and getting older. But let's face it, the only alternative to aging is dying, not the best alternative. Technically, aging is what we want. We see the age gap in healthcare, where somehow every American medical school requires a pediatric rotation, but only 10% require geriatric rotations. Keep in mind, this is common practice despite the fact that we expect to see a more than 45% increase in demand for geriatricians by 2025. The age gap also rears its head around in our everyday lives. When my dad forgets to buy something at the grocery store, his go-to excuse is, "Sorry, I'm getting old." My dad is not old. He just hasn't discovered the wonders of making a grocery list yet. And every year on her birthday, my mom jokingly insists that she's turning 30 again because she doesn't want to tell people her real age. But why? Is it that bad to let people know you were, get this, born at a time when people still used physical maps to get around places? Like, can you imagine? The age gap is problematic because it stigmatizes the natural aging process. By making people dread the thought of getting older, ageism fosters depression and isolation in older adults, which can contribute to feelings of worthlessness and lack of purpose. In our youth-oriented society, we are immersed in a culture where, when given the opportunity, individuals are much more excited about young kids than they are about older adults. Take my college, for example. I go to a huge public university with over 6,000 students in my class alone. You'd expect to see a lot of represented interest in my student body. At the beginning of my freshman year, we had a giant annual fair where all the clubs came out and tried to recruit new members. Walking up and down the aisles of tables, I was so disappointed to see that among the hundreds of student organizations present, there were a couple dozen youth service clubs, but there was only one oriented towards the older adult generation. Of course, I joined, but I find that it's a constant struggle trying to get my peers to get involved with the work because they're afraid it's going to be boring or depressing. Through no fault of their own, my peers are an example of what happens when negative stereotypes become so culturally ingrained that they turn into implicit prejudices. This is a small and specific example, but think about what the implications are on the large scale. These phenomena create a fragmented society where every day older adults grow more and more disconnected and isolated. You see, the more we perpetuate negative stereotypes about older adults, the more older adults internalize them. And what happens when you keep hearing the same things over and over and over again? They become your reality. The age gap and all associated ageism instills in our older adults that they are useless, unimportant, a burden. As someone who's never been personally victimized by the age gap in this way, I didn't really understand this until I had a conversation with an 87-year-old woman named Abigail, who lives in an affordable housing community in the Bay Area. I talk to Abigail weekly as part of my nonprofit work that provides social companionship resources to isolated older adults. Abigail is an incredible woman who's lived an incredibly rich life full of community activism work and volunteering with elementary school kids. Now, Abigail is almost completely blind and living on the 4th floor of an apartment complex that has no elevators and a constant stream of maintenance issues. One week, as I'm talking to Abigail, I can tell she's incredibly upset about something, near the brink of tears. She informs me that her housing community is gutting its entire plumbing system, cutting off water supply to each apartment for several days. You might be thinking, that's normal, what's the big deal? Well, no water for cooking or drinking, that's one thing, but what about the bathrooms? Don't worry, the landlord had that covered. He installed portable bathroom units in the parking lot. Reasonable solution, don't you think? Well now, I want you to close your eyes so you maybe can't see the world as well, like Abigail. I want you to put yourself in her shoes and imagine, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the rainy season, would you be able to walk down 4 flights of stairs, cross the parking lot, go to the bathroom, and then go all the way back up? Would you feel scared of falling? Would you feel nervous about someone with bad intentions waiting for you at the parking lot? Would you feel comfortable knowing that you might have to do this several more times throughout the night? It was no wonder Abigail was feeling anxious and depressed. I mean, who the heck wouldn't be? As troubling as this story was for me to hear, what was even more troubling was Abigail's learned helplessness and just acceptance of the situation. When she first shared her story with me, my initial reaction, a naive one I admit, was to ask her to bring it up to her housing director or her social worker. Of course, she had already done this numerous times before. You see, this was not the first time something had gone wrong in her apartment complex. Through all its inconveniences, Abigail had filed complaint after complaint, desperately seeking some sort of nighttime aid or additional accommodation. But every time in the past, she had been either shut down or ignored. What saddened me the most was that at this point in time, Abigail genuinely believed that even if she were to voice her opinion in some way, she would be ignored or criticized for being that grumpy old lady who complains a lot and creates problems for everyone else. In what world is this okay? We have an entire population of people just like Abigail, who, as a direct result of the age gap, have grown to accept the incorrect realization that they don't have anything to contribute, that their voices don't matter, that their needs are not important, that they don't provide value to society. This compounds their isolation and makes them feel invisible. And this is an actual public health issue. A recent study found that the prolonged health effects of isolation are comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And issues related to ageism and loneliness cause Medicare to spend an additional $6.7 billion annually. Not only is this a social issue, but from a fiscal and medical perspective, combating ageism is huge. And the data doesn't lie. What's fascinating is that a more positive and optimistic view of aging adds 7.5 years to your lifespan, gives you a 44% better chance of recovering from disability, reduces your cardiovascular disease risk by 80%, and is associated with less anatomical evidence of Alzheimer's. A more positive and optimistic view of aging lessens the generation gap that leaves older adults behind and feeling devalued. I'm not afraid to admit that just a few years ago, I was a prime example of this problem as a perpetuator of the ageist mentality. As a classic Gen Z individual, immersed in my own generation and my own bubble, I always imagined nursing homes to be filled with the smell of stale air and grumpy people who fell asleep every 5 minutes. It wasn't until a high school community service requirement literally forced me to start volunteering at one that I realized just how ignorant I had been in my thinking. At that nursing home, I met a World War II veteran, a former professor at my university, a college football player, and the first teen female Bay Area radio host. I met some of the most genuine, kind, wise, and dynamic people I had ever met, and the stories they told me, oh my God, they were incredible. That work was amazing and opened me up to a whole world of truly meaningful interaction that I hope to continue for the rest of my life. I am confident that if every individual of my generation had an experience like this, there would be no ageism. So where do we start? First, understand that the age gap is a problem and that it is huge. Today, there are over 600 million people over the age of 60. This number is expected to double by 2050 and triple by 2100. Understand that the stereotypes associated with the age gap have real implications on people in terms of their health, well-being, and connection to society. Check yourself. Think about the implicit stereotypes you hold and whether or not they're actually true. Realize that turning 65 comes with a lot more than just random senior citizen discounts at buffets and movie theaters. Redefine the way you think about your own age. You're likely propagating the age gap without even knowing it. Challenge others. Call people out for their ageist language and jokes, the same way you would for their racist and sexist ones. Don't tolerate any ageist language or actions in your immediate circle of influence and beyond. Commit to action in whatever form makes sense to you. Volunteer at an assisted living facility. Join a club that supports the older adult generation. Proudly tell people your actual age on your birthday, or just pick up your phone and call your grandparents. Finally, most importantly, celebrate age. Appreciate the elders in your life, not just for their experiences and wisdom, not just because they may be several decades older than you, but because they're genuinely really awesome people who have a lot to share. Turns out, I have a lot more in common with an 86-year-old man than you might think. Who knows, some of you might too. It's especially important for us as millennials and Gen Zers to take the stand, because intergenerational societies are the healthiest. The more we engage with this population, the shorter the age gap becomes. At the end of the day, the one thing that everyone in this room has in common, that everyone in this world has in common, is that every day, every one of us ages. It's as simple as that. Aging is the most natural biological process. So why perpetuate a society that's going to discriminate against ourselves in the next few decades? We're only making it harder for ourselves and the people we love to get older. I could sit here and list off to you all the tangible things that'll make aging easier for all of us. Getting exercise, maintaining social networks, eating healthier, but anyone could tell you that. If you walk away with one thing today, I hope it's the realization that simply the way we perceive the aging process can make a whole world of difference. Let's destigmatize the aging process and redefine what it means to grow old so that our 80th birthdays can actually be something to look forward to. Thank you.